All right, students, this is topic F17, estimate positive and negative square roots, and its shortcut 96T. So let's jump right in. So first off, if somebody said find the square root of something, many students find themselves memorizing this, not letting it make sense. That's goofy. Take a look. Let it make sense to you right now. If I said there was a square that had an area of 16, first off, area is talking about this space inside of there. Literally 16, maybe we want to say like square inches. And what it's really saying is that you have 16 little tiny squares that fit in there. Now, if there were 16 squares that fit in there, and someone said, hey, can you describe how big that square is to me? You might be tempted to say, well, there's 4 inches on one side, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 inches on this side, the next side is 1, 2, 4, the next side is 4. Yeah, it's 4 by 4 by 4 by 4. You'd look at that person and say, dude, just tell me, it's a square. Tell me the root side of that square, and that'll be enough. What we're really saying is that the root side would just be 4, and if I said the root side of that square is 4, you'd know all the sides were 4. Someone decided along the way to make a symbol for this language, and they said, hey, if I asked you what the square root side of a square whose area is 16 is, you would say, well, the square root of 16, well, let's think about that. 16, 16 is a square made up of two numbers that multiply. Those numbers have to be the same because squares have all the sides the same. How many rows, how many blocks would be in each row? What's the length and width? Well, it would be 4 times 4. So 16 is 4 times 4. But the root side of a square that's a 4 by 4 square would just be one of those. And we'd say, well, his root side is 4. So whether I write it this way, square root of 16, that's equal to 4. Whether I say square root of 4 times 4. So if you have two numbers under a radical is a fancy word for this symbol here. If there's two of them, you write it once. And if it's square root of 16, you can think of it as 4 by 4, or you can just write it if you know it in your head. So that is the basic idea of square root. Let's take a look at this example here. In our problem, we have square root of 114. So what two integers is the square root of 114 between? What we probably want to do is think of numbers that are close to this. So I'm going to think of the number line. Okay, 0, 1. Okay, skip a whole bunch of numbers. We're not getting close enough. I'm thinking of numbers like 10. Square root of 100 is 10. That's pretty close to 114. Square root of, 121. If you don't know that, just 11 times 11, work it out or type it in a calculator. And already it's like, wait a second, 121, that's bigger than 114. What number do I take times itself to get 114? There probably isn't one. This is probably going to be a case that we get a decimal number for this one. So the square sides are not a pretty number. They're a decimal number, a rational number. And this, though, would fall somewhere between these two, probably somewhere, about here. But one thing we know is whatever number it is, maybe it's 10.6, 10.5, it is between 10 and 11. So we have already arrived at our answer for this topic on F17. Let's go ahead and take a look at our next problem. Here we go. All right, next problem. This is more typical to this topic. It's talking about the negative square roots. One way I might read this is that we want to know which two integers is negative radical 45 between. That's the same thing as saying the negative version of square root of 45. It's just a little easier to say. Let's find numbers that are close to that. And in this case, here's 0, ... skip a little bit. We are going to want to jump ahead to numbers closer to that. So we're thinking numbers like maybe -6, which would be square root of 36, but there'd have to be a negative sign in front of it. How about -7? That would be 49 with a negative sign in front of it. And I think we're good. Negative square root of 45 would actually fall right between those ones. So it'd be between, in this case, -6 and -7. So finish that problem. Let's go on to our next example. Okay, hey, in this problem, they're going to use the less than signs. We know that's the less than sign because it looks like the letter L. And that only works, though, if you're reading it going left to right. So as you read this, some number blank is less than whatever number this is, which is less than some other number. And we want to fill in these boxes with integers that are close to that or between that. So let's give it a shot. Let's picture our number line. Here we go. If we had square root of 74, well, I'm thinking of a perfect square, maybe 81. Square root of 81 is 9. And let's go a little lower. I'm thinking 8 over here. That'd be square root of 64. So here we are. Square root of 74 is actually really close to these. It's pretty darn close to these. So that's going to be somewhere between 8 and 9. It's probably about 8.5 or something like that. But more importantly, how do we fill in these numbers? Does 8 go here or does it go here? That's the big question. We don't know. So let's go ahead and think about this carefully. 9. Is 9 going to make more sense to say, if this number, square root of 74, is about 8.5, would 8.5 be less than a number, or is it, in a way, greater than whatever number is over here? Well, it actually would be less than 9. 8.5 is less than 9, approximately. So that means that the 8 would go here, because 8 is actually less than 8.5. Let's type those in, make sure we're not going crazy. So there's the 8, tab, 9. All right, let's take a look at our next example. I think these are a little trickier. This is when we have a negative sign. Negatives and what's less than and what's greater than can traditionally be kind of tricky. Here we go. Let's give it a shot, students. So we have, let's say 5, negative 5. That'd be negative radical 25. Negative 6. That'd be square root of 36 with a negative sign in front of it. And negative radical 27 would fall about right over here. It actually would be really close to this one. So here's the deal. 27, the negative sign, that's only 2 units away from 25, 2 radicals away. 27 is about 9 units away from the number 36. So we would say that on the number line, it falls a lot closer to the square root of 25, which is 5. So it's probably more like 5.2 or so. That'll be your next problem coming up. For now, we can just go ahead and say, well, which one would the alligator rather have? Would he rather have a negative 5 or a negative 6 in comparison with this number in the middle, which is about negative 5.2 roughly? Well, the alligator would rather have negative $5 a debt than negative $5.20. So negative 5 goes in this spot. Negative 6 is actually less than negative 5.2 because it's further from 0. A little confusing. Just think of debt, though, and what number is actually less than it. Let's take a look at one last example. Okay, hey, for this last example, we need to choose the number that is closest to this. So we're not necessarily typing in a calculator, although we could. This is more of an everyday skill. A lot of times you get radicals in life, and we just need to be able to give a quick estimation of what that number would be. So once again, go back to your number line, and let's go ahead and write down some that are close to that. So I'm thinking 16 is equal to 4, and radical 25 is equal to negative 5. So if we throw a negative sign in front of those, we could actually say which one is radical 17 closest to, a radical 16 or a radical 25. And we would say that it is really close to this one. Negative radical 17 is about 1 unit away from 16. It's about 8 units away from the number 25. So it is a lot closer on the number line to the 4. So we would probably say it's about negative 4. Just a little bit more, maybe 4.1, something like that. There's our answer right there. And I believe that's going to conclude the basic problems you'll see on this topic, F17. Why don't you guys give it a shot on your own? Let me know if you have questions. Great job for working and learning. See you guys later.